Hello, 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 hello. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second day of Octia's Clean Tech Week at the Park. My name is Maike Althaus. I'm the Executive Director of the Ontario Clean Technology Industry Association, and it's great to see so many of you bright and early this morning. I'm joining you today from Toronto, which is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. Here with me on the panel, I have two wonderful gentlemen this morning. One is Peter MacArthur, who's the chair of Octia and RBCX National Clean Tech Lead in his day job. And I also have here with me Sebastian Alamillo Falkenberg, who's the leader of KPM Accelerate and deeply involved in the creation of a new Chemtech commercialization hub in Kingston, the ARCS and Reaction Hub, and representing our gold sponsor today. Thank you to both of you for being here. So we have a little bit of time. We'll be joined today at 9 a.m. by the Honorable David Piccini, our Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks. And so I'll use the time to give you a little bit of an overview of the program, the rest of the program for this week, and a few other activities we're planning on the Octia front. So after the fireside chat this morning, we're going to continue this afternoon at 3:15 p.m. with another fireside chat. This one is with Dave Smith, who's the Parliamentary Assistant to our Minister of Northern Development, Mines, Natural Resources and Forestry. And he's also the MPP for Peterborough Kawartha. So we have a few members in that area, so it's going to be interesting. There's Clean Tech Commons, there's also a Claris Ozone and a few others. So if you're not registered yet and interested in the chat, we'll cover the EV supply chain, probably critical minerals. That's going to be interesting. On Wednesday morning, we will continue with the NDP's environment and climate critic, Peter Tabbins, or maybe the environment critic. So someone else, we're not sure yet. We were informed that Peter had last minute medical treatment to undergo and wasn't sure if he'd be able to join. So we're waiting for confirmation on that, but the chat is happening. At least that's the status as of today. At the time we had planned it to happen, and I'll keep you posted on any changes that may occur here. We're going to end the week, I think, on a high note with a fireside chat with the leader duo of Ontario's Green Party, Mike Schreiner and Diane Sachs. So it's going to be good and interesting as well. And if you haven't registered again, please do so. I'd also like to take a few minutes to thank our sponsors and partners. As I said, there's our gold sponsor, RXN Reaction Hub, silver sponsor, MyTax, and bronze sponsor, DryStill, all Octia members. And thank you as well to our partners who helped promote the event and helped out with logistics, Canada Clean Tech Alliance, Clean Tech North, CSI Climate Ventures, Energy Storage Canada, and the Ontario Sustainable Energy Association, OSEA. Few words about Octia programming over the next month. So we'll keep doing interesting stuff. We're launching a new program with NRC IRAP. We had a program connecting clean tech ventures with solutions in the hydrogen space with engineering consultants. The companies were eligible to receive up to $15,000 for this work. We're extending this to companies with circular economy solutions, and the funding envelope is going to be a little bit bigger. So each company is eligible for up to $25,000 for work with engineering consultants. In early May, we're going to host another showcase/pitch event with the companies that participated in this hydrogen Connect program that we run for NOC IREP. And we're looking into possibly more pitch event, and we will probably also do some other events on advocacy given the elections in June, and yeah, keep the ball rolling on that front. So I'm just looking, we have a few minutes left, and I think the minister is not yet here, as far as I can see. Okay, so maybe I'll use the time to do a little bit of an intro to Peter. Most of you probably know Peter, but maybe not the details. And Peter, I'll let you say a few words about yourself as well. So Peter is a seasoned commercial corporate banker with a diverse background. He's a very keen supporter of the clean tech sector in Canada. And Peter is a subject matter expert within the bank, as well as a speaker and advocate for the sector. He works with a wide variety of clean tech companies, ranging from early stage commercializing businesses to small public companies. And in 2019, Peter was recognized as a clean tech leader by Canada's Clean 50. He was also recognized by RBC in both 2017 and 2020 as a conference award winner, a distinction reserved for the bank's top 1% of performers. And as I said, Peter is the chair of the Ontario Clean Technology Industry Association and also on the board of Canada Clean Tech Alliance. Thank you, Peter, for moderating this fireside chat today.
Micah, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for the kind introduction. It's nice to hear it in so much detail.
Yeah. So I feel like we're again a little bit in improvisation and waiting mode. We know that from yesterday. So maybe we can kind of already start and touch a little bit on our discussion points today. And talk a little bit on the importance of political support and incentives for the clean tech sector.
Micah, maybe what I could do is, we had the pleasure of having David Piccini speak with us in September of last year,
right,
on players in the hydrogen economy. And I just thought it might be helpful for our audience to give some background on that before we get into the discussion with David, because it was quite a deep dive into
right,
hydrogen. And I'll talk about it a little bit when we're speaking with David. Yeah. But in Ontario, 17%, we're talking about electrification of our society. 17% of our total energy envelope is electric. So 83% isn't. So we're talking about electrification. Obviously, there's lots of room. But when you think about how we heat our homes, how do we move our vehicles, how do we move our trains, a lot of it isn't. And so hydrogen represents the potential to have 5 to 30% of that energy envelope. And it's an intriguing sector. It's only one potential clean technology solution, but it's appears to be maybe some of the gold at the end of the rainbow in terms of it getting us to net zero. And he made some great commitments about Ontario being a leader in hydrogen. We already are, but we could be more of a leader. And Canada is a top 10 provider of hydrogen in the world, but we've got the ability as the top green hydrogen provider in the world. That chemistry, KPM and others help work in the chemistry space, is so relevant to us getting there. And I just think it's exciting to think about that, what the potential is. Hydrogen for cement, heavy industry in Ontario, big part of our footprint. Hydrogen has the ability in the cement and the steel sectors to really have an impact. Cement is 5 to 8% of the world's GHGs.
Yeah.
Fundamental building material. Yeah. You can't look anywhere and not see it. You look at the floors below you, the walls beside you, the bricks in your house, like there's cement everywhere. And it's a huge part of our footprint and a fundamental building material.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things I hope to touch on with David when we get into our discussion.
Yeah, huge potential for Ontario if we think decarbonizing our heavy industry, but also transportation. I believe, though, that hydrogen, maybe for that reason, because it's about electrification, is now in the Minister of Energy's resort. But I assume that David Piccini will certainly be able to talk about that with us. But I believe it is probably because of that. But hopefully we'll learn a little bit more when he arrives. But yeah, and also very curious about the hydrogen strategy, which I believe hasn't come out yet. So that'll shed some light onto Ontario's path forward as well, and it's going to be interesting. So maybe there's another Octia event on that front right there. Okay, I'm getting a note, and good morning, Minister.
Good morning.
Wonderful to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be with all of you.
And we'll start. We have Peter MacArthur, whom you know, Octia's chair here, and Sebastian Aramillo Falkenberg for KPM Accelerate and a new Chemtech commercialization hub that he's creating in Kingston. And we'll have the honor of hearing a few opening remarks from Sebastian today. And with that, Sebastian, I'll throw you right in. Over to you.
Sure, yeah. I just have a couple of slides I was hoping to be able to share, but thank you so much for having me. Basically, it's really unfortunate that events like this have to be happening because, you know, last year with Ontario having all the most largest wildfires ever in our history, the presence of things like climate change is really showing. The immediate impact is here and now. And unfortunately, the tools that we have available to us to actually mitigate some of these challenges are just out of date. You know, in this specific example, we're seeing the foams that were used to fight forest fires actually containing chemicals that go into and poison our water supplies. They were created in the 50s and the 80s, and really innovation has lagged behind. But there are companies all over Ontario that are working here now to bring new technologies using private sector strategies to market so that we can address these, leveraging the power of chemistry. The current sustainability problems that we have can be solved by innovative new firms by leveraging new chemistry to create solutions for the future. So, you know, companies like Li-Cycle, prime example of the Made in Ontario story, they are able to accelerate super fast through a commercialization pathway by leveraging the support of stakeholders across Canada, but it's specifically in Ontario. But not everybody's so lucky in the startup stage of their commercialization. The commercialization pathway it's vast, it's dynamic, it's multi-stage, and there's so many people involved. At the early stages, sorry, I think I'm having technical difficulties here. Can you see my screen?
I've shared the PowerPoint now, Sebastian. Is that good?
Oh, sure.
You just need to let me know where you want to go.
Why don't we just skip the PowerPoint today? It's age of Zoom, eh? Sorry about that. But incubators and accelerators are awesome at being able to support early stage ventures. But once companies get to the stage of growth where they're actually doing scale up and piloting, most startups are unable to get to that next stage because Canada has a major commercialization gap that it needs to be filled in order to bring the best talent to Canada, keep them in Canada, and bring the best future of chemical technologies or clean technologies and keep them in Canada as leaders. So that's hydrogen, that's EVs, that's batteries, all of that needs to stay in Canada. So moving forward, all of us in the ecosystem need to work at collaborating in commercialization hubs, creating new technical infrastructure for scale up, and making sure that our universities are actually educating and preparing the next generation of talent for great commercialization. So without further ado, I'm so excited to introduce the Honorable David Piccini, Minister of the Environment, and hear what he has to say about where the direction of Ontario is going to help support better chemical technologies and clean technologies in the future.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. And with that, I'll hand over to Peter and Minister Piccini.
Sebastian, thanks so much for the context setting and the relevance. I wasn't aware of the foams we use to fighting fires poison the water that we're dropping there. So yeah, I'm here to introduce you, David, but I can't help but say the importance of chemistry as a core competency in Ontario's educational ecosystem amongst our population and its ability to solve many of our problems. So I laud what you're doing, Sebastian, at KPM and NRX. It's incredibly relevant. That's where the solutions are. So thanks so much for joining us today. David, welcome back.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here again today. We had a great discussion last September. And as I mentioned in a bit of a preamble, I'm hoping we're going to be able to get back to some of that. But bienvenue also pour nos collègues qui parlent français. It's David Piccini is the MPP for Northumberland Peterborough South as a member of the governing Conservative Party, first elected in 2018. A quick rise to the top in June of 21. He became Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks. And 3 months into his tenure, we decided to test him and talk about hydrogen last September. And David, you did a great job, and looking forward to talking about hydrogen and other clean tech things during our discussion today. So just to give a little background on you, David, tell me if I get anything wrong, but you were an advisor on international development at the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons. You were a co-founder of the Canadian International Health Education Association. You happily live in Port Hope, Ontario, with 2 dogs, Max and Lena, and your fiance. And the place that you and I cross paths a little bit is, you love to hike the Northumberland County Forest Trails, and you love to visit Killarney Provincial Park with your father. And I mention the outdoors because I think it connects us to where we're from, the environment that we're part of, the environment your ministry looks after. And as I mentioned before, through your riding runs Trent Severn Waterway, which is where I met my wife, close to my heart, Lift Lock Romance, and Killarney is just, it's one of those jewels of our province. It's kind of happy it's not too well known, but it should be better known. It's so spectacular. And we're very lucky with some of the great natural beauty we have here. So without further ado, David, I'll pass the baton over to you, and then we'll get to some questions.
Thank you, Peter. Great to be with all of you this morning. And yes, love the great outdoors. If you haven't had a chance yet, visit our first ever permanent online provincial park store, where 100% of the revenue proceeds go towards our provincial parks, expanding trail system, and yes, improving the booking system, which changes coming into effect next year. To my chagrin, I tried with Camus, I believe, our provider, to get that in this year, but more coming. A really exciting opportunity to connect with the outdoors, but really excited to be with you here and with everybody virtually. Peter, thank you for the introduction. Sebastian, for setting the context. I greatly value the work you do, and good morning, everybody. Pleased to be here with you on a fireside chat as a part of Clean Tech Week at Queen's Park, and especially pleased to speak to our clean tech advantage here in Ontario and have a meaningful discussion about how we can secure a cleaner, more prosperous future for Ontario, for future generations to come. And when I say future generations to come, I believe Martin's joining Clean Tech Commons in our own backyard in Trent University, just north of the riding that I represent. And why I mention that, apart from the fantastic job that they're doing at Trent, coolest meeting I've ever had with the president, kayaking the Trent Severn, Peter. So it's not just home for romance, it's also home for very neat meetings, by far the coolest meeting I've had with the university president. And, we have an advantage. And if you're to take one thing, I think that advantage in Ontario is our talent. We have world-class research institutions, world-class universities, and our college system, and really leveraging that to continue to be a leader and to position Ontario as a global leader is imperative as we take the steps in the coming months and years ahead. I want to start by thanking you all for the work that you do to build and support this critically important sector. I know that technology and clean technology is central to our successful transition to a more just, to a cleaner growth, a cleaner economy, and it'll help deliver both environmental and tangible economic outcomes in years to come. Because of the great work that you're doing, we can proudly say we know that Ontario is a global leader in the acceleration of clean tech technologies, a leader in Canada. We know we have the largest clean tech sector across Canada, and as a part of our work to address climate change, our government has continued to look at ways we can support clean technology and broader economic growth and recovery efforts as we look to both living with COVID-19 and a more post-pandemic reality. And the ministry, my ministry and Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and the incredible team that work in our district offices, together with our colleagues across government, have been working hard to encourage innovation and clean tech solutions in the private sector through smart policies, progressive actions to reduce needless red tape, and are we're seeing, spurred investment, making it easier and faster to get clean tech projects off the ground. For example, we've had an exciting year building our electric vehicle sector, launching the Driving Prosperity Plan that Minister Fideli's been a leader on, a strategic plan to secure Ontario's position as a North American leader in developing and in building the electric cars of the future. In fact, I'm on my way down tomorrow to see reclamation of synthetic graphite from arguably the largest deposit in landfills in North America just tomorrow. And I know that being a leader in automotive manufacturing and the exciting investments that we're seeing are unlocking a potential that is enormous. A visit up to Oro Station, we're seeing, as much as I love Mossport and I love F1, it's exciting to see an opportunity there where we're going to be testing right next to a large and growing airport, testing EVs, testing their functionality, testing autonomous vehicles, and being a leader in that right here in Ontario. We've also been making historic strides in green steel making. That's really exciting for me. I mean, when I think on my father's side of the family, my grandfather who immigrated from Italy, it was steel that gave that side of my family, the Piccini side, a start in Ontario. With nothing in their pockets, he and his brothers built a family here in Canada. And so to go down to Stelco to talk about carbon capture technology, to visit Algoma, Dofasco, and see the work that we're doing through the electrification of the arc furnace and the incredible technology we're leveraging to be a leader in steel making on a provincial and economic stage. Ontario can and will be a leader. And on a personal stage for me, to see come full circle just 2 generations later as Ontario's environment minister, to stand there, see those employment records of my grandfather, and to see how we're continually striving to be a leader in clean steel production. And we know we've released plans for boosting our critical minerals strategy and biomass sector, leveraging technology. Again, on the critical minerals front, I think there's been some remarkable discussions and very rewarding discussions on reconciliation that we've been fortunate to be a part of with Indigenous partners, Treaty 9 territory, most recently for me and Minister Rickford. And it's an exciting future for us to be a leader, for us to take real lessons learned from a very scarring and difficult past, but working together with Indigenous partners to be a leader in critical minerals is an incredible future for this province. And in biomass and in even recycling, leveraging the technology as a part of, technology has dominated the discussions on blue box reformation and our extended producer responsibility legislation that has now set Ontario as a leader among North America's highest standards for recycling. I look forward to go into a little more detail during the discussion and on the work that our government has done, and hearing from you about work we can do together to achieve our shared goals. Some of the most inspiring conversations for me are out in the community, at the doors, when we're knocking on doors or in meetings. Politics, I've always said, is a two-way street. And as much as be skeptical of the politician that has all the answers, because I think it's a two-way street, and we get inspired on a day-to-day basis with all of you. That's what keeps my clock ticking, these sorts of discussions. And then having, politicians that have the energy to get it done. And so I want to thank you for the work that you're doing. Clean tech is important to us as it is to you. With that, Peter, I think it's a good time to begin the discussion. I want to hand it back to you. Thank you for having me, and look forward to continuing our discussion both today and into the months and years ahead.
David, thanks for that. You're obviously very aware, committed about our sector, and love having you as a guest. So it's great you're able to join us. Yesterday, the International Panel on Climate Change made some pretty dire announcements. If we want to, according to COP, maintain our warming to below 1.5 degrees of our pre-industrial levels, and we're getting very close to it, we're seeing the consequences of it. We want to stay below that. We've got to take drastic action regarding fossil fuels, so alternatives like the EVs you're talking about, regarding the food we eat, regarding the forests and the trees we plant, and many, many other things, very drastic. Jim Shea said it's now or never. We're on a path to 3.2 degrees. So Canada didn't have a lot of fun environmentally in 2021. If we're on a path to 3.2, hold your horses. This looks like a rough ride. So lots to be done very quickly. You don't want to do it ignorantly, but we've got to get there darn fast. So what does success look like for you, and how can the clean tech sector help you achieve that?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, briefly, I'd just like to touch on a few things, I think, to very much address this. I mean, from green space and protected areas, we're talking with Nature Canada and Ontario about national marine conservation areas. We've talked about adding protected areas, important role that plays in sequestering carbon with large expansions like South Shore in Prince Edward County, having interesting discussions down north of the French and into Northern Ontario as well. Leveraging the tech in the EV sector, our steel making, transportation, public transit, have received the largest investments in Ontario's history under our government. So, I mean, we could go in depth on each, but success, and in particular, the clean tech, I think, for me, working closely with a whole of government approach. I mean, we need to take, and I know it's being done differently through provinces across Canada, but really taking a whole of government approach to environmental sustainability, but to also with a clean tech lens. And so we're breaking down silos and barriers in government, and why this matters. Leveraging clean tech, for example, in the cement making process with the regulatory changes that we made recently. How that benefits is when we have a whole of government approach now to procurement, we can incentivize. I mean, if the government isn't investing in and buying solutions from our clean tech sector, if we're not doing that, then why would anybody else? So I think taking those policies in a whole of government approach is an important first step. We've worked with Ministry of Energy, as you know, Peter. We've discussed growing our hydrogen sector, and I'm excited to say, that this week we look forward to sharing details in depth on what that strategy looks like. And that's going to be in the coming days later this week. And we've been working to leverage our strengths and positions as a leader in that EV space, as you said, which involves both the tech aspect, working with our research institutions, colleges, critical mineral strategy to unlock the potential in the north, working on streamlining some of the environmental assessment processes for our Class EA assessments, and really making sure that we're leveraging clean tech solutions to help streamline those processes, not at the expense of the environment, but making sure we're early adapters and first movers on some of these solutions. So, from EVs to biomass to regulatory changes and things like the cement sector, for me, that's success. And in Ontario, being a leader through our own procurement and breaking down silos in government as a first step, but leveraging the talent going forward to foster leaders across many sectors, it will be incredibly important for the government.
You mentioned something that's quite close to the hearts of the clean tech sector, and that is procurement. Whether it's government or private sector, it's something that we seem to be lacking in Canada. Often clean tech companies have to sell outside of Canada first. So one of the things that the federal government's talked about is attributing a $300 a ton price to carbon as a monitor or offset when you're looking at making acquisitions, to think about the long-term impact of those acquisitions. When you talk about procurement, can you give us any insight about how you're looking at procurement in the provincial government?
Yes, I mean, taking a low carbon procurement lens through procuring as a government, and a tangible example of that, Peter, would be the largest low carbon public transit project in North America, I believe, right now, being the Ontario line. So that's I recently met with McDonald, I believe, on this, and speaking with them about the work that they're doing. Analyzing the steps that we're taking. So again, from cement to steel, and to ensuring, there are trade implications in all of this that are dealt with at a national level, and we work, of course, with the federal government. But I think for us, through low carbon procurement and Ministry of Infrastructure with Minister Surma's industry, we've been working together, both with our cabinet colleagues and with the broader public service, to lead, to lead by example. And I think Ontario Line is the best example, arguably, we can show in North America right now.
Public transit, key to reducing our footprint. So glad to hear about that one. You also talked about critical minerals, and developing it responsibly in partnership with Indigenous First Nations and others, ensuring that it's environmentally compliant. I've been told that it takes 10 years to develop a mine in Canada today. And, we talked earlier about the urgency of getting some of these solutions, the opportunity of the EV battery supply chain. So any insight you can add in terms of the development of critical minerals and how we're going to get there faster?
It's a really good question. Well, I think it starts with having a plan. So Ontario, this is the first time ever in our province's history that we've developed a critical mineral strategy, which is a 5-year roadmap to better connect the mines in the north with manufacturing sector in the south, particularly obviously the EV sector, battery manufacturing, tapping into new and growing markets. As I mentioned, EVs, telecommunications, batteries, and national defense for that matter. But how we expedite it, I think back and reflect, Peter, on one of the asks I had when I became minister, was similar to what we've done in the skilled trades. Let's see a roadmap. And, if any of us have traveled globally and lamented the fact that transit maps in places like Shanghai and other cities are very complex webs. Ours is pretty simple in Toronto. But the path we don't build mines, but we regulate and we implement important actions along the course of a mine's construction. That web is more complex than the Shanghai subway system. And that's part of the problem, Peter. When it takes me months working with our bureaucrats and within the department just to unpack and figure out the various touch points with multiple different ministries, that's a problem. And so I think our roadmap, being the first province to do that, is an important first step. But constantly looking at ways that we can take a whole of government approach so that we're not stopping and starting and people aren't having to get whiplash through dealing with different ministries in our government. And so I've really been bullish in trying to take a leadership role in our ministry in unpacking some of those touch points and working with the mining sector. I think we've made important strides. But I'll be very frank and open and honest with all of you. One of the challenges as a minister, there's only so many hours in a day, and dealing with the challenges that are coming in the office have helped inform me about where certain challenges lie. We're having a very real a national discussion on reconciliation, and I think that presents an opportunity. So I know Minister Rickford and I have been up, I mentioned Treaty 9 territory, seeing Indigenous leadership in that opportunity. We've been excited with the terms of reference I signed off on with Martin Falls and Webequie. It's not just about critical minerals. This is unlocking important social services, mental health, health services, social service delivery. And if we look south of the north, I think we look to leading institutions like Trent. They've got an incredible partnership with Curve Lake on how to do things quickly, on how to do it cognizant of the national reconciliation that we're having, and really setting out a roadmap. So our roadmap is not just on critical minerals, it's helping path a roadmap on reconciliation, a roadmap on dealing with some of those barriers that I spoke about within the ministry. I'm still getting more lines, if I will, if I use the subway analogy, on that map, Peter, right now with our ministry. And I think that important two-way dialogue, I said politics is a two-way street, helps industry really unpack with us. People, nobody, I don't think by and large, I've seen people who are objecting to important environmental safeguards. I think it's the moving goalposts that is the biggest frustration. I think it is the constant touch points and lack of clarity on the process that is the biggest frustration. And that's where we're looking to break down silos, break down barriers, all within the umbrella of the critical minerals strategy. And every day I learn something new, Peter, and we commit as public policymakers to addressing those systemic challenges.
That's a great answer. Thanks very much, David. And you're right, it's not simple. It's complex and takes a lot of concerted effort. You've in your process answered a bunch of the questions I was going to ask you. We've gotten some, rather than me dwelling and jumping deeper on those, I thought there've been a couple questions from the audience before we run out of time here, and that I thought I'd just pass out to you. You mentioned circular economy, waste, landfills, and one of the questions here is talking about methane gas being 80 times more impactful as a greenhouse gas than carbon.
Yes,
are there thoughts about capturing methane from organic waste?
Absolutely. I think to Ingersoll right now, one of our EV manufacturers, and they're capturing in the automotive sector methane gas as we speak. I think it's Walker Industries, for example, doing some of that methane capturing right now. But I think it requires leadership from a government. So your group is the first to hear it, but in the coming days, we will be making announcements that sets tangible targets for complete zero emissions stance with respect to our landfills into the future, and more to come in the coming days. But it's an important benchmark that the province of Ontario will be setting in the days to come. And I think we're seeing the incredible capturing technology that exists today. And as in drafting the regulation, Peter, Zach, I think some of the challenges from a public policy standpoint is we don't want to, in the context of organics, we don't want to disincentivize the technology and the innovation that we've seen at our landfills. and be less competitive. In fact, I think this is a job opportunity. I think this is a chance that we've taken to leverage technology to capture the very harmful methane emissions, to generate energy from it. And we're seeing that now as we pursue a cleaner, greener future. We've also said, we're going to stop sending recyclables into landfills as well. We've launched the highest targets as a province for recycling. We've said to producers, how often, I'll just grab something here, how often do you get this packaged in this? And wonder, I mean, with as great as Amazon's been through the challenging time through the COVID pandemic, anybody who lives in a condo, you've probably received an email from a concierge about the disastrous pile of Amazon boxes, or you've driven by on your way home and seen the front stoops of many people's houses. And I think the only way to incentivize real leadership in manufacturing isn't through municipalities jacking up your taxes to fund a waste system that actually isn't improving at all. The costs are going up. Our recycling is flatlined at 30%. It's through extended producer responsibility and making producers responsible for the end cycle of their products. And again, on that, Ontario has set the highest targets in North America and are a leader in that. I know some of you may have read that Toronto Star piece. I think a bit unfair given I was early on as minister, but there were many assertions that were correct, and we're constantly fixing and tweaking, working with producers to develop a system that will be North American leading and one that we can be proud of. So great question from Zach. Yes, we're on it. A little hint on where we're going, but also a little synopsis on EPR.
Minister Piccini, I want to thank you. I think we've run out of time. Merci beaucoup. You were very engaged and very committed to our sector. We really appreciate your participation today, your knowledge of the clean tech sector, the potential for being the genie inside the bottle that can help us solve many of the challenges that Ontario and Canada and the world are facing. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'll pass it over to Micah.
Thanks, Peter, and thank you so much, Minister Piccini, for being here today. Great discussion, really grateful. Before we close, don't miss our next Fireside Chat, 3:15 today with Parliamentary Assistant Dave Smith. We're gonna dig a little bit deeper into hopefully the EV supply chain and critical minerals, things we talked about this morning. And last but not least, I wanna thank our sponsors again, RxN Reaction Hub, MyTax and DryStill, and thank you also to our partners. And with that, I wish you a wonderful morning. See you later today. Thanks again, Minister Piccini. Thanks, Peter, for moderating. Have a good day.